In the darkness before dawn, when the world still rests in the quiet embrace of night, a single bell begins to ring across the valley. Its voice is clear and ancient, echoing off stone walls that have stood for centuries, calling the faithful to prayer as it has done every morning for generations beyond counting. This is the Bell of Lauds, the prayer of praise that greets the coming light, and its sound ripples through the cold air of a medieval monastery like a gentle hand rousing sleepers from their dreams. In a small cell within the dormitory, Brother Thomas stirs beneath his woolen blanket, his breath visible in the chill morning air. He has lived in this monastery for 7 years now, since he arrived as a young novice with ink-stained fingers and a heart full of devotion to the sacred art of copying manuscripts. The stone walls of his cell are bare, except for a simple wooden cross, and through the narrow window, the sky is still deep indigo, scattered with the last bright stars of night. He rises slowly, his movements practiced and unhurried, for there is a rhythm to monastic life that flows like a river, steady and eternal. The flagstones are cold beneath his feet as he stands, reaching for his habit that hangs on a wooden peg beside his narrow bed. The fabric is rough and familiar against his skin, carrying the faint scent of lye soap and wood smoke from the monastery's fires. He fastens the rope belt around his waist with movements that have become ritual, each morning identical to the one before, each gesture a small prayer of preparation for the day's sacred work. Outside his cell, he can hear the soft shuffle of other brothers making their way through the dormitory. Their footsteps, a gentle percussion against stone, no voices breaking the precious silence of these hours before dawn. Brother Thomas pauses for a moment, his hand resting on the cool iron latch of his door, and offers a quiet prayer of gratitude for another day, another opportunity to serve through the patient work of his hands. Then he opens the door and steps into the corridor, joining the silent procession toward the chapel for morning prayers. The corridor stretches long and shadowed before him, lit only by a few tallow candles in iron sconces that cast pools of amber light against the stone. The walls here are thick limestone, quarried from the earth generations ago by monks whose names have been forgotten, but whose labor remains solid and enduring. Brother Thomas walks with his hands folded inside his sleeves for warmth, his steps measured and quiet, joining the line of dark-robed figures moving like shadows through the passage. The air is cold and still, carrying the scent of old stone and beeswax, of damp earth, and the faint lingering smoke from yesterday's fires. Above them, the vaulted ceiling disappears into darkness, and their footsteps create a soft echo that seems to multiply in the silence, a gentle reminder of all the brothers who have walked these same stones before them, decade after decade, century after century. They move through the cloister, that beautiful open courtyard at the heart of the monastery, where the covered walkway protects them from the elements while allowing a view of the sky. In the center of the cloister garden, Brother Thomas can just make out the dark shapes of herbs growing in their careful beds, lavender and rosemary, sage and thyme, plants tended by Brother Bartholomew with the same devotion that Brother Thomas brings to his manuscripts. The sky above is beginning to shift now, the deepest blue starting to soften at the eastern edge. Those stars still shine overhead like scattered diamonds on velvet. The bell has fallen silent, but its echo seems to linger in the air, a vibration more felt than heard. The brothers file into the chapel, a space of soaring beauty even in darkness, where candles have been lit before the altar, their flames steady and golden in the still air. Brother Thomas takes his place in the choir stalls, the wooden seat worn smooth by countless hours of prayer, and as the abbot's voice rises in the opening words of the Psalms, he joins his brothers in the ancient chant. The Latin words flow like water, like wind through trees, each syllable shaped by devotion and repetition. And for these moments, Brother Thomas is not an individual, but part of something larger, a voice in a chorus that has sung these same prayers for over 1,000 years. The candlelight flickers across the faces of his brothers, creating shadows and highlights that make them seem timeless, as though they exist outside of the normal flow of hours and days, dwelling instead in a space of eternal devotion. When the prayers conclude, the brothers rise as one and file out of the chapel in the same reverent silence, with which they entered. The sky has grown lighter now, a deep purple blue that holds the promise of sunrise, and a few early birds have begun to sing in the orchard beyond the monastery walls. Brother Thomas turns not toward the refectory where some of his brothers will take a simple morning meal, but toward the eastern wing where the Scriptorium awaits. This is his particular calling, the work to which he has dedicated his life, the careful, patient copying of sacred texts, the preservation of knowledge and beauty through the art of the manuscript. The door to the Scriptorium is heavy oak, its iron hinges smooth and silent from regular oiling, and when Brother Thomas pushes it open, he steps into a space that feels like a sanctuary within a sanctuary. The room is long and high-ceilinged, with a row of tall, narrow windows along the eastern wall that will soon fill with morning light. The windows are not the colored glass of the chapel, but clear, designed to let in as much illumination as possible for the detailed work performed here. Even now, in the early dawn, a soft grayish light is beginning to filter through, gentle and growing. The Scriptorium is arranged with great purpose and care. Long wooden desks stand in rows, each one positioned to catch the best light, each surface smooth and clean, ready for the day's work. At each desk sits a high stool, and beside each stool is a small cabinet where each scribe keeps his personal tools, his quills and knives, his pumice stones and rulers. Along one wall stand larger cabinets where the precious materials are stored, parchment and vellum in various sizes, bottles of ink, both black and colored, pots of gold leaf sealed carefully against moisture, blocks of pigment waiting to be ground. Brother Thomas moves to his desk, the third from the window, a position he has occupied for the past 3 years since completing his apprenticeship under Brother Augustine, the master illuminator. The desk is just as he left it yesterday evening, clean and ordered, his tools put away with care. He runs his hand along the smooth wood, feeling the slight dips and hollows worn by decades of use, wondering which brothers sat at this very desk before him, what texts they copied, what beauty they created with their patient hands. Through the windows, the light continues to grow, and Brother Thomas can see the sky transforming from purple to rose to the palest gold. Brother Thomas begins his morning preparations with the same ritual he follows every day, movements that have become a form of meditation through countless repetitions. First, he opens the small cabinet beside his desk and removes a linen cloth, which he spreads carefully across his work surface, smoothing out every wrinkle and fold. This cloth will protect the precious parchment from any oil or moisture from his hands, for even the smallest mark or stain could ruin hours of careful work. Next, he takes out his quills, selecting 3 that he prepared yesterday, their nibs already cut and shaped, and arranges them in a small ceramic holder within easy reach. The quills are goose feathers, long and graceful, their natural curve perfectly suited to the movements of writing, and Brother Thomas treats them with the respect due to any tool that serves a sacred purpose. He removes a small knife with a worn wooden handle, its blade kept sharp for trimming quills and scraping away mistakes, and places it parallel to the edge of his desk. From the common stores along the wall, he collects a small horn of black oak gall ink, unstoppering it carefully and smelling its familiar metallic bitter scent that speaks of iron and tannins, of darkness captured and made useful. He pours a small amount into his inkwell, a simple clay vessel that sits in a carved depression in his desk, designed to keep it steady and prevent spills. Around him, his fellow scribes are engaged in their own morning rituals, each brother moving through his preparations with the same quiet efficiency, the same devotion to order and readiness. Brother Augustine, the eldest among them, is already seated at his desk near the largest window, his white beard catching the growing light as he examines a page he completed yesterday, checking for any flaws or corrections needed. Brother Martin, younger even than Thomas, is grinding pigments with a mortar and pestle, the gentle scraping sound rhythmic and soothing in the quiet room. Brother William is cutting new quills, his knife moving with practiced precision, tiny curls of quill falling like pale petals to be swept away later. No one speaks, for the rule of silence is observed here as strictly as in the chapel, but there is a companionship in the shared work, a sense of brotherhood that needs no words. The light through the windows has turned golden now, true sunrise arriving at last, and the scriptorium begins to glow with a warm, honeyed radiance that seems to bless every surface it touches. Brother Thomas settles onto his stool, adjusts his posture so his back is straight and his arm can move freely, and opens the manuscript he has been copying for the past 3 weeks. A Gospel of St. Matthew, the Latin text flowing in careful columns across pages of creamy vellum. Brother Thomas looks at the text before him, the exemplar from which he is copying, a manuscript already over 200 years old, its parchment darkened with age, but its text still clear and beautiful. He will not simply copy these words mechanically, letter by letter without thought. No, each word is sacred, each sentence a teaching, and so he reads first, letting the meaning settle into his mind and heart. Beati pauper spiritu, quoniam ipsorum est regnum caelorum. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The words of the Beatitudes, familiar as his own breath, and yet each time he reads them, they seem to hold new depth, new beauty. He dips his quill into the dark ink, lets the excess drip back into the well, and brings the nib to the fresh page of vellum before him. The first stroke is always a moment of commitment, the instant when the pure cream surface accepts its first mark, when potential becomes actual. His hand is steady as he forms the first letter, a tall, elegant B that will begin the word Beati. The ink flows smoothly, darkening immediately upon contact with the prepared vellum, and Brother Thomas feels that familiar sense of rightness, of being exactly where he is meant to be, doing exactly what he is meant to do. This is his prayer, this careful formation of letters, this preservation of holy words. This is how he serves God and his fellow souls. Not through preaching or teaching, not through tending the sick or feeding the poor, but through this quiet, patient work that ensures knowledge and beauty will survive, that words written centuries ago will be passed on to centuries yet to come. Outside, the monastery is waking fully to the new day. Somewhere in the kitchens, bread is being baked, filling the air with the scent of yeast and wheat. In the gardens, Brother Bartholomew will be beginning his work among the vegetables and herbs. In the chapter house, the abbot will soon be reviewing the day's business with the prior. But here in the scriptorium, time moves differently, measured not in hours but in letters, in words, in the slow progression of lines across a page. The golden morning light spreads across Brother Thomas's desk like a blessing, illuminating the page before him, catching in the wet ink so it seems to glow for just a moment before it dries to a permanent matte black. He continues to write, each letter formed with care, each word a small act of devotion, settling into the rhythm that will carry him through the day. The dip of the quill, the stroke of the nib, the formation of each careful character, one after another, in an endless patient procession that is, in its own way, a kind of prayer without words, a meditation that will deepen as the hours pass, drawing him ever further into that quiet place where the world falls away and only the work remains, sacred and eternal. The heavy wooden door of the scriptorium opens with the softest whisper, a sound that has been smoothed by centuries of careful hands, and Brother Thomas steps across the threshold into a space that seems to exist outside of ordinary time. The morning light has just begun its slow journey through the narrow lancet windows that punctuate the eastern wall, sending pale shafts of illumination across the long chamber. Each beam filled with slowly drifting particles of dust that move like tiny stars in their own small universe. The air here carries a particular scent, one that Brother Thomas has come to associate with devotion itself, the earthy richness of oak gall ink, the faintly animal smell of scraped vellum, the mineral coolness of pigment powders, and beneath it all, the ancient stone of the walls, holding centuries of prayer within its patient mass. He moves quietly to his appointed place at one of the long wooden desks that line the room, each one positioned to catch the precious daylight, each one bearing the marks of decades of use, worn smooth where countless hands have rested, bearing small stains where ink has occasionally escaped its proper boundaries. His desk is as he left it the evening before, for the scriptorium is a place of order, where everything remains in its designated position, where chaos is held at bay through the simple discipline of returning each tool to its proper home. The manuscript he has been copying, a Gospel of Matthew that will eventually join the monastery's growing library, sits waiting under a clean linen cloth, protected from dust and dampness through the night. Other scribes are beginning to arrive now, moving to their own places with the same quiet reverence, acknowledging one another with the smallest of nods, for excessive speech is discouraged here, where silence itself becomes a kind of prayer, an emptying out that makes room for the sacred work. Brother Thomas settles onto his wooden stool, feeling his body align itself with the familiar posture of his craft, and slowly, with ritual deliberation, he begins to prepare his workspace for the day ahead. Each movement part of a pattern he has performed so many times that his hands seem to know the way without his conscious thought, leaving his mind free to sink into that deep, quiet place where the work truly happens. The tools of Brother Thomas's craft are simple, unchanged for generations, perfected through centuries of use until nothing unnecessary remains, only what serves the essential purpose of transferring sacred words from one page to another. His quills, cut from the flight feathers of geese, rest in a small wooden holder, each one trimmed at a slightly different angle to suit different purposes, different letters, different moods of the work. He selects one now, feeling its familiar weight, the slight roughness of the shaft against his fingers, testing its point against the pad of his thumb with the gentlest pressure. Beside the quills sits his inkwell, a simple vessel of dark glazed ceramic that holds the precious ink he and his brothers make themselves from oak galls, those strange round growths that form on oak trees where wasps have laid their eggs. The galls are crushed and boiled with iron salts and gum arabic until they yield this deep, permanent black, an ink that will outlast the centuries, that will still be readable when all who write with it today have long since returned to dust. The vellum itself, stretched before him on the slanted desk, is a marvel of preparation. Calfskin that has been soaked in lime to remove the hair, stretched on frames until it is taut as a drum, then scraped with curved blades until it is smooth and pale as snow, thin enough to be translucent when held to the light, yet strong enough to last for ages. He can see the faint traces of the ruling he did yesterday, the barely visible lines that will guide his script, keeping each line perfectly straight, each letter at the proper height. To his left, arranged in small ceramic containers no larger than a child's cup, are the pigment powders that will eventually become the illuminations, ground minerals and stones that hold color within their substance. There is lapis lazuli from distant Afghanistan, ground to a powder as blue as the vault of heaven. There is vermilion, brilliant and red as blood, made from cinnabar. There is white lead and yellow orpiment, green malachite and warm ochre from the earth itself. Each pigment must be ground fresh when needed, mixed with egg yolk or gum to bind it, applied with brushes made from the finest squirrel hair. But that work will come later. For now, Brother Thomas dips his quill into the ink, watches the dark liquid climb the split in the nib through simple capillary action, one of nature's quiet miracles, and he positions the point above the vellum, steadying his hand, emptying his mind of all but the first letter he will form, letting the silence of the scriptorium settle into his bones. The first stroke of the day is always the most significant, the moment when intention becomes reality, when the blank space of vellum receives its first mark of transformation. Brother Thomas touches quill to page, and the ink flows from nib to surface in a line so fine it seems almost to have grown there naturally, a hairline curve that begins the letter B, the start of a verse from Matthew that speaks of blessedness. His hand moves with a control born of years of practice, the pressure constant, the angle precise, creating strokes of uniform width that have a rhythm all their own. Thick downstrokes where the nib's two tines spread slightly under pressure, thin hairlines where the quill moves sideways or upward, requiring barely any pressure at all. The letter forms he creates are not his own invention, but follow the house style of this monastery, a variant of Carolingian minuscule that has been passed down from master to apprentice for generations, each letter shaped according to precise proportions, each space between letters carefully calculated, creating a visual harmony that makes the text not only readable but beautiful, a worthy vessel for the holy words it carries. Around him, other scribes have begun their own work. and the scriptorium fills with the soft sounds of their shared labor. The whisper of quill on vellum, a sound like the gentlest rain on leaves, repeated over and over at each desk. Someone coughs quietly, covers their mouth with their sleeve. Someone else shifts on their stool, the wood creaking almost imperceptibly. But these small sounds do not break the concentration. Rather, they deepen it, for there is something profoundly peaceful about working in the company of others who are engaged in the same task, the same devotion, moving together through the hours like monks chanting in unison, each voice individual, yet part of a greater whole. Brother Thomas completes the first word, then the second, his quill returning to the inkwell, in a motion that has become as automatic as breathing. The pause, while the ink is absorbed into the nib, serving as a tiny rest. A moment to refocus before continuing. The morning light has shifted slightly, climbing higher on the eastern wall, and the quality of illumination in the scriptorium has changed from the pale gray of dawn to something warmer, more golden, as the sun rises above the monastery walls. Time here is not measured in minutes or hours, but in letters completed, lines finished, pages turned. Brother Thomas lets himself sink deeper into the rhythm of the work, feeling his breathing slow to match the pace of his strokes, feeling his thoughts begin to quiet and scatter like those motes of dust in the sunbeams, until there is nothing but the next letter, and the next, and the next, each one a small act of devotion, each one bringing him closer to that place of perfect stillness at the center of the work. As the morning deepens, Brother Thomas finds himself entering that state of consciousness that the ancients called contemplatio, a way of being that is both intensely focused and completely relaxed, where effort and ease merge into a single flowing movement. His hand knows what to do without his needing to direct it consciously. Each letter emerges from the accumulated wisdom of thousands of repetitions, muscle memory so deeply ingrained that it has become almost instinctive. This frees his mind to rest in a kind of alert emptiness, aware but not grasping, present but not straining, simply witnessing the miracle of creation as it unfolds through him, stroke by careful stroke. The gospel text he is copying speaks of the Sermon on the Mount, those luminous teachings about meekness and mercy, about the pure in heart who shall see God. And though Brother Thomas has copied these words many times before in many different manuscripts, they never lose their power to move him, to remind him of why this work matters, why each letter must be formed with love and attention, for these words carry within them the possibility of transformation, of healing, of illumination in its deepest sense. The vellum before him is gradually filling with text, line by carefully ruled line, the black ink standing out crisp and clear against the pale surface. Each letter distinct, yet harmoniously connected to those around it, creating that peculiar visual music that a well-written page possesses, where the eye can flow smoothly from word to word, from line to line, without stumbling, without confusion. Occasionally, he pauses to let a completed line dry before his sleeve or hand might smudge it, using these moments to rest his eyes on the view beyond the windows, where he can see a small patch of the monastery garden, green and growing, tended by other brothers whose work is different from his but equally sacred, equally devoted to creating beauty and sustaining life. A bee moves lazily through the warm air beyond the glass, attracted by the lavender that grows in neat rows along the path. Somewhere distant, a bell marks the hour of terce, the third hour, calling those who are not bound to special duties to pause for prayer. But the scribes continue their work, for their labor is itself a form of prayer, a living meditation that requires no words, only this steady, patient attention, this willingness to give themselves completely to the task at hand. Brother Thomas dips his quill again, returns to the page, finds his place in the text, and continues, the afternoon still stretching before him, full of promise, full of letters yet to be born from the marriage of ink and intention. The hours flow like honey, slow and sweet and golden, each one barely distinguishable from the last, for time in the scriptorium moves by a different measure than it does in the world beyond these walls. Brother Thomas has completed nearly a full page now, the text flowing across the vellum in neat columns, each line a mirror of those above and below it, the consistency of letter forms creating a visual texture that is restful to behold. that draws the eye not through drama or contrast, but through gentle harmony, through the peaceful repetition of familiar shapes arranged in endlessly varied combinations. His hand is steady, showing no sign of fatigue despite the hours of careful work, for he has learned to write from his shoulder and back rather than from his wrist alone, to let the larger muscles bear the weight of the work, to stay relaxed even in the midst of precise control. The other scribes continue their own labors in companionable silence, and Brother Thomas is aware of them as a kind of supportive presence, knowing that he is part of something larger than himself, part of a great work that stretches back through the centuries and will continue long after he is gone. These manuscripts they create with such painstaking care will travel to other monasteries, to churches, to the hands of scholars and nobles who hunger for knowledge and beauty. Some will survive for hundreds of years, carrying forward not only the sacred texts they contain, but also the silent prayers of all who labored to create them, the accumulated devotion of countless careful hours. There is something deeply satisfying about being part of this chain of transmission, this great act of cultural preservation, knowing that in copying these words faithfully, he is ensuring that they will not be lost, that future generations will have access to the wisdom of the past. The morning has ripened now into something approaching midday, the light in the scriptorium bright and steady, perfect for this exacting work. And Brother Thomas pauses to flex his fingers gently, to roll his shoulders, to take a deep breath and release it slowly, settling himself even more deeply into the work, into the silence, into this timeless place where nothing exists but the sacred task, the holy letters, the endless patient devotion of quill meeting vellum, again and again, in a rhythm that will carry on through the afternoon, through the evening, through all the days of his life, each stroke a prayer, each word a benediction, each completed manuscript a testament to the transforming power of attention, patience, and love made visible in ink and vellum, preserved for all time, or for as long as time itself endures. And now, as the morning hours give way to the fullness of midday, Brother Thomas sets down his copying quill and turns his attention to a different kind of work, a different expression of devotion. The text has been faithfully transcribed, each word rendered in the careful Caroline minuscule that has become second nature to his hand, but the manuscript is not yet complete. Now comes the illumination, the transformation of sacred words into something that catches light and holds it, that draws the eye and lifts the spirit toward contemplation of divine beauty. He adjusts his position on the wooden bench, feeling the familiar pressure of the seat beneath him, the coolness of the stone floor through his sandals. The scriptorium around him continues its gentle symphony of quiet sounds, the whisper of Brother Benedict turning a page, the soft exhalation of Brother Michael as he leans back to examine his work, the distant echo of bells marking sext, the midday prayer. But Brother Thomas remains at his desk, as is permitted when a manuscript nears completion, and the rhythm of illumination requires unbroken attention. Before him lies the page he will now adorn, the text neatly copied, the spaces carefully left blank where decorated initials will bloom like gardens in the margin. He reaches for a different set of tools now, tools reserved for this sacred art. A dish of gesso, prepared days ago from chalk and glue, smooth as cream. Sheets of gold leaf, impossibly thin, each one capable of tearing at the slightest breath, resting between pages of vellum in a small wooden box. Brushes of varying sizes, their bristles made from the finest squirrel hair, each one coming to a perfect point. And the pigments, small ceramic pots containing colors ground from minerals and plants, from lapis lazuli carried along ancient trade routes, from local woad and madder, from verdigris formed on copper plates. Each color tells a story of earth and transformation, of patience and process. Brother Thomas closes his eyes for a moment, offering a silent prayer that his hands might be steady, his vision clear, his heart pure as he undertakes this work. The illumination of manuscripts is not mere decoration, he knows. It is theology made visible, a way of honoring the sacred text, of creating beauty that serves as a doorway to the divine. When he opens his eyes again, the world seems to have grown even quieter, as if the very air is holding its breath, waiting. Brother Thomas begins with the gesso, the foundation upon which the gold will rest. He takes up a fine brush, dips it into the dish, and begins to paint the outline of a letter, a great ornamental I that will begin the phrase in principio, in the beginning. His hand moves with careful deliberation, following the faint guidelines he sketched earlier in lead point, building up the gesso in thin layers. The mixture is slightly sticky, slightly raised above the surface of the vellum, creating a cushion for the gold leaf that will come next. Each stroke must be precise, the edges clean, the surface smooth. He works slowly, allowing each layer to dry slightly before adding the next, building up the form gradually. The letter will be elaborate, a tall vertical column decorated with foliate patterns, leaves, and vines that seem to grow from the very letters themselves, intertwining and reaching upward. In the center of the letter, there will be a medallion, and within it, a miniature scene of creation, the divine hand reaching forth into darkness, calling forth light. But that will come later. For now, there is only the gesso, only the careful building of the foundation. Time passes in a way that feels both measured and immeasurable. The bells ring for none, the mid-afternoon prayer, and Brother Thomas pauses, sets down his brush, and joins his brothers in the choir, his voice rising with theirs in psalms that have been sung in this place for centuries. Then he returns to his desk, to the waiting page, to the gesso that is now dried to a smooth, slightly glossy surface, ready to receive the gold. This is the most delicate part, the moment that requires the steadiest hand and the calmest breath. Brother Thomas prepares himself, breathing slowly and deeply, feeling his heartbeat settle into a steady, gentle rhythm. He opens the box containing the gold leaf, moving with exquisite care, protecting the precious sheets from even the slightest draft. Using a specialized knife called a gilder's tip, its blade flat and slightly greasy from the natural oils of his skin, he approaches a sheet of gold. The leaf is so thin that light passes through it, turning it translucent, almost ghostly. He touches the blade to the gold, and as if by magic, the leaf adheres to it, lifting from its protective page. Moving with infinite slowness, barely breathing now, Brother Thomas transfers the gold to the gessoed surface of the letter. It settles onto the sticky base, conforming to its shape, catching the light from the window in a sudden, brilliant flash. Brother Thomas releases his held breath slowly, gently, watching as the gold leaf settles onto the gesso, adhering perfectly to the raised surface. For a moment, he simply observes, allowing the adhesion to strengthen, the bond to form. Then, with a soft, clean brush made of squirrel hair, he begins to burnish the gold, pressing it more firmly into the gesso, smoothing out any wrinkles or air bubbles, working from the center outward. The brush moves in small, circular motions, and with each pass, the gold becomes brighter, more lustrous, beginning to glow with an inner light that seems independent of the sunlight falling through the window. This is the miracle of gold leaf illumination, how something so fragile, so impossibly thin, can create such radiant, lasting beauty. The excess gold, the fragments that extend beyond the edges of the letter, he carefully brushes away, collecting them in a small dish to be saved. For gold is precious, and nothing must be wasted. These scraps will be ground even finer and mixed with gum arabic to create shell gold, a paint-like substance that can be applied with a brush for smaller details. But the main letter now gleams on the page, a declaration of light, of value, of the sacred importance of the words that follow. Brother Thomas allows himself a moment of quiet satisfaction, of gratitude for the gift of skill, for the steadiness of his hands, for the beauty that has emerged from patience and care. But there is more work to be done. The gold is only the beginning. Now come the colors, the pigments that will bring life and variety to the page, that will transform the letter into a garden of earthly and heavenly beauty. He reaches for the first pigment, a brilliant ultramarine blue, made from ground lapis lazuli, so expensive that it is reserved only for the most important elements, usually the robes of the Virgin Mary, or as here, elements of divine creation. He adds a few drops of water mixed with gum arabic to the dry pigment in its pot, stirring gently with a small glass rod until the mixture reaches the perfect consistency. Not too thick, not too thin, smooth and even. He tests it on a scrap of vellum kept for this purpose, observing the color, the way it flows from the brush, the way it dries. Satisfied, he loads a fine brush with the blue and approaches the page. His hand is steady, his breathing slow and even. The first stroke of color goes onto the page, filling in the background of the medallion that will contain the miniature painting, creating a field of deep heavenly blue, the color of the sky at twilight, the color of mystery and transcendence. The blue dries slowly, deepening in hue as it does, becoming richer, more saturated. Brother Thomas waits, exercising the patience that has become as natural to him as breathing, as essential to his craft as any tool or pigment. While the blue dries, he prepares other colors, a warm vermilion red made from cinnabar, a soft green from verdigris, a pale pink from white lead mixed with a touch of madder root. Each pigment is ground, mixed with its binding medium, tested, adjusted. The preparation of colors is itself a meditation, a ritual of attention and care. When the blue has dried sufficiently, he begins to add details. With vermilion, he paints delicate vines that curl around the shaft of the letter, each tendril carefully shaped, each leaf precisely formed. The red is vibrant against the cream of the vellum, warm and alive, suggesting growth, vitality, the blood of life itself. Where red and blue meet, he ensures crisp edges, clean boundaries, the mark of a master illuminator. With the green, he adds leaves, alternating with the red vines, creating a sense of natural abundance, of a garden flourishing in the margins of sacred text. And within the blue medallion, he begins the miniature painting, the figure of the divine hand, emerging from stylized clouds, reaching toward a sphere of creation. The hand is painted in careful layers, starting with an underpainting in a middle tone, then adding shadows with deeper tones, highlights with lighter tones mixed with white lead, building up the form gradually, creating the illusion of dimension on the flat surface of the vellum. Each finger is articulated, each nail carefully defined, each fold of drapery suggested with economical expert strokes. The work is minuscule. The entire medallion is no larger than a coin. But Brother Thomas's vision is clear, his hand perfectly controlled, his brush responding to his intention as naturally as his own fingers. Hours pass. The light from the windows shifts, growing slightly more golden as afternoon progresses toward evening. The other scribes continue their own work, each absorbed in their particular manuscript, their particular moment of creation. The scriptorium is filled with a profound, comfortable silence, broken only by the gentlest sounds, brush against vellum, the quiet intake of breath, the settling of a robe as someone shifts position. Brother Thomas adds the final touches to the miniature, a few strokes of pure white to catch highlights, suggesting divine radiance, and a fine outline in dark ink to define the forms more clearly, to make them readable even in the dim light of a church or monastery. As the illuminated letter nears completion, Brother Thomas works with increasing slowness, each stroke more deliberate than the last, savoring the final moments of creation, reluctant to let the work end even as he longs to see it complete. He adds a border around the text block, a narrow frame of intertwined vines in golden color, punctuated at intervals by small blossoms, roses, lilies, imaginary flowers that exist only in the gardens of manuscripts. Each blossom requires a dozen tiny strokes, building up petals and stamens, highlights and shadows, creating something recognizable as a flower, yet stylized, belonging to the artistic vocabulary of illumination rather than to the natural world. The repetitive work is deeply soothing, each flower identical to the last, yet somehow unique, each vine following the same pattern, yet with subtle variations. His breathing has become very slow and deep, his heartbeat calm and even, his mind clear of all thoughts except the immediate reality of brush and pigment and vellum. There is no past, no future, only this eternal present moment, this flower, this stroke, this breath. The world beyond the scriptorium has ceased to exist. There is no monastery, no kingdom, no century. There is only the work, only the calling forth of beauty from simple materials, only the devotion made visible. Time becomes meaningless, or rather, time becomes something different. Not a sequence of moments, but a single sustained note of attention, of presence. This is the gift of illumination, Brother Thomas knows. Not the beautiful object that results, though that is precious. Not even the glory given to God, though that is the purpose. But this transformation of consciousness, this entry into a state of pure being, where the self dissolves into the work, where the work becomes prayer, where prayer becomes simply the natural state of existence. He paints the last petal of the last flower, adds a final tendril of gold, signs his work with the tiniest inscription, Thomas me fecit. Thomas made me, hidden in the border where only the most attentive eye will find it. Then he sets down his brush, flexes his fingers slowly, and looks at what he has created. The illuminated page glows before him, the gold catching the afternoon light. The colors rich and harmonious, the miniature painting clear and devotional, the text framed and honored and transformed from mere words into a sacred object, a threshold between earthly and divine. He breathes deeply, slowly, feeling profound satisfaction, profound peace, profound gratitude for this work, this life, this moment. Outside the scriptorium windows, the light is beginning to shift toward evening, growing slightly softer, slightly more golden. Soon the bells will ring for Vespers, the evening prayer. But for now, there is only this silence, this completion, this beauty that will endure long after his hands have forgotten their skill, long after his name has been forgotten. The work itself, a testament to something beyond any individual life, something that speaks across centuries in the universal language of devotion, craft, and love. And as this truth settles into his awareness, Brother Thomas feels the afternoon deepening around him, the quality of light shifting imperceptibly from the brightness of midday towards something softer, more contemplative, more inward. The scriptorium has grown profoundly quiet, a silence so complete it becomes almost tangible, a presence in itself rather than merely the absence of sound. Even the usual small noises, the shifting of weight on wooden benches, the quiet clearing of throats, the soft footfalls of brothers moving between desks, have faded into something approaching absolute stillness. Only the scratch of quills remains, a gentle rhythmic whisper that punctuates the silence without breaking it, that becomes part of the silence itself, woven into its fabric like thread through cloth. Brother Thomas dips his quill once more, the familiar gesture now so automatic it requires no conscious thought, his body knowing the movement as deeply as it knows breathing, as naturally as the heart knows its steady rhythm. He returns to the page before him, to the words that have become his meditation, his prayer, his entire world in this moment. The Latin flows across the vellum in careful measured strokes, each letter formed with the same devotion as the last, each word given equal weight, equal care, equal reverence. His breathing has slowed to match the rhythm of his work, deep and even, barely perceptible, his chest rising and falling in time with the movement of his hand across the page. Thoughts that troubled him earlier in the day, small concerns, fleeting worries, the countless minor anxieties that populate a human mind, have quieted completely, dissolved into the vastness of this silence, this concentration, this perfect attention to the present task. He is aware only of the quill in his hand, the black ink flowing from its tip, the cream-colored vellum receiving each letter, the words taking form beneath his careful guidance. Outside the tall, narrow windows, the afternoon sun has begun its slow descent toward evening, the light growing warmer, more golden, slanting at a lower angle through the ancient glass. Dust motes drift through the beams of light, tiny particles dancing their eternal dance, rising and falling, turning and gliding, unhurried and graceful. The stone walls hold their perpetual coolness, that constant temperature maintained by thick ancient walls that have stood for centuries and will stand for centuries more, unchanging, steadfast, enduring. Brother Thomas completes another line, his eyes moving slowly across the words to check their accuracy, to ensure each letter rests properly on its invisible baseline, that each ascender reaches the proper height, each descender extends to the proper depth. The rules that govern his work have become second nature, the guidelines and proportions internalized so deeply he no longer needs to think about them consciously. His hand simply knows, his eye simply sees, his entire being aligned with the ancient standards of his craft. He begins a new line, the quill moving with that same steady, deliberate pace, never rushing, never hesitating, finding the perfect rhythm between speed and contemplation, between productivity and meditation. Around him, his fellow scribes maintain their own silent vigils at their desks, each man absorbed in his particular work, each engaged in his own conversation with the text before him, the words of scripture or philosophy or history passing through his hand, through his attention, being reborn on fresh pages through the alchemy of skill and devotion. Brother Martin, the eldest scribe, works 3 desks away, his white beard catching the afternoon light, his gnarled hands still steady after decades of this work, still capable of the finest detail, the most delicate flourishes. Brother Thomas can hear the distinctive scratch of Martin's quill, slightly different from his own, recognizable across the room. A little slower, a little more deliberate, the sound of a lifetime of practice distilled into pure expertise. Young Brother Peter sits near the window, barely 18, in only his 2nd year as a scribe, his movements still slightly uncertain, his concentration fierce and focused as he learns to master the demands of the craft. Each man contributes his part to the great work of preservation, of transmission, of keeping knowledge alive through the centuries by the simple act of careful copying, word by word, page by page, manuscript by manuscript. The afternoon continues its gradual transition toward evening, time moving at its own pace, neither fast nor slow, simply flowing like water, like ink from a well, like breath from lungs, inevitable and natural. Brother Thomas feels himself sinking deeper into the work, his sense of separate self growing quieter, his awareness expanding to encompass the whole room, the quality of light, the presence of his brothers, the ancient building surrounding them with its protective walls, and beyond that, the monastery grounds, the chapel, the gardens, the hills rolling away into the distance. All of it part of one seamless whole, one continuous reality in which he is merely a single thread, a single stitch in a vast and infinite tapestry. He dips his quill again, a movement so familiar it happens almost without volition, the simple ritual of renewal, of replenishment. The quill touching the surface of the black ink, drawing up just enough to continue, not so much that it will blot or drip. The perfect amount learned through years of practice, through countless thousands of repetitions, until the knowledge lives in the muscles and nerves themselves rather than in conscious thought. The nib returns to the page, finds its place, continues the word he had begun, completes it, moves to the next and the next, the text unfolding in its inevitable progression, the Gospel of Matthew in this case. Words he knows by heart, words he has read and heard and copied dozens of times, their familiarity deepening rather than diminishing their power, each encounter revealing new layers, new resonances, new meanings that emerge from the depths of repetition, like islands emerging from mist. The scratch of the quill becomes a form of music, a slow rhythmic meditation, each stroke a note, each word a phrase, each line a melody that carries him forward through the afternoon, through the hours, through time itself. His breathing synchronizes completely with the movement of his hand. Breath in as the quill lifts, breath out as it descends to form the next letter, breath in during the pause, breath out during the stroke, an endless cycle of inhalation and exhalation woven seamlessly into the cycle of lifting and writing, pausing and continuing. The outside world has vanished entirely from his awareness. He is not thinking of meals or prayers or duties or seasons or any of the concerns that typically occupy a human mind. He is present only in this moment, in this breath, in this letter taking form beneath his careful hand. The walls of the scriptorium seem to dissolve, or perhaps to expand infinitely outward, the room becoming a universe unto itself, a complete world bounded by stone and silence and sacred work. Time loses its usual meaning, its forward urgency, its pressure and demand. There is no past pulling at memory, no future calling for attention, only this eternal present moment stretching out in all directions, vast and spacious and infinitely peaceful. Brother Thomas forms the letter B for blessed, his hand moving through the familiar curves and straight lines, the rounded belly of the letter, the vertical spine, the 2 graceful curves stacked one above the other, beautiful in their proportion, in their balance, in their simple elegance. Blessed are the poor in spirit, the words say, words 2,000 years old, words copied countless times by countless scribes in countless scriptoriums across centuries and continents. And here they are, being born again under his hand, given new physical form, preserved for another generation, for another century, carrying their message forward into the unknowable future. The silence deepens further still, if such a thing is possible, becoming more profound with each passing moment, with each breath, with each letter formed on the page. Brother Thomas has entered a state that transcends normal consciousness, a place where there is no separation between the worker and the work, between the scribe and the scripture, between the hand and the word. He is simply an instrument through which ancient wisdom flows from one page to another, from one form to another, a conduit rather than an actor, a vessel rather than a creator. His mind has grown so quiet that he can hear the subtle sounds usually lost beneath the noise of thought. The whisper of his robe against the wooden bench as he shifts slightly, the tiny crackling sound of the quill tip moving across the slight roughness of the vellum surface, his own heartbeat steady and slow in his chest, the movement of air through his nostrils as he breathes. In and out, as regular as waves upon a shore, as constant as the turning of the spheres. Each letter becomes a meditation unto itself. The curve of a C is traced with such attention that he feels the movement not just in his hand, but in his entire arm, his shoulder, his whole body participating in the gesture. The crossing of a T becomes a moment of perfect horizontal precision, the line extending exactly the right distance in each direction from the vertical stroke, balanced and true. The descender of a P reaches downward with graceful purpose, touching the guideline and stopping precisely at that point, neither too far nor not far enough, just exactly right. There is perfection in this repetition, in this patient accumulation of letters into words, words into sentences, sentences into verses, verses into pages, pages into manuscripts. There is peace in the absolute predictability of the process, in knowing exactly what comes next, in the security of ancient patterns and time-tested methods, in the comforting restriction of rules and guidelines that eliminate the need for constant decision-making, that free the mind by limiting the options, that create space for contemplation by removing uncertainty. Brother Thomas can feel the words he is copying, not just with his eyes and hand, but with something deeper, some inner sense that recognizes their weight, their importance, their sacred character. These are not merely words, but living truths being transmitted across time, teachings meant to guide and illuminate and transform. And he is honored to serve as their guardian for this brief moment in their long journey from past to future, from author to reader, from inspiration to preservation to rediscovery. The afternoon light continues its slow transformation, the golden tones deepening toward amber, toward the rich, warm glow that comes only in the hour before sunset, when the world seems to hold its breath between day and night, between activity and rest, between the seen and the unseen. Brother Thomas writes on, his movements growing even slower, even more deliberate, as if he is gradually approaching some state of perfect stillness, some ultimate quietness that exists at the heart of all motion, the way the still point exists at the center of a turning wheel. Each letter emerges from the silence and returns to the silence, appearing on the page like a thought arising in consciousness, existing for its moment, then settling into place and becoming part of the permanent record, no longer separate but integrated into the whole. His breath has become so slow and gentle, it is barely distinguishable from the general stillness of the air around him, the slightest movement of inhalation and exhalation, life continuing its patient rhythm, requiring nothing, demanding nothing, simply being. The scratch of quills throughout the room has achieved a kind of harmony, multiple rhythms finding their way into a subtle symphony of sound, each scribe contributing his particular voice to the collective music of scholarship, of preservation, of devotion expressed through craft. Brother Thomas feels no tiredness despite the hours of work, or rather, he feels tiredness transformed into something else, a pleasant heaviness in his limbs that anchors him more firmly in the present moment, that makes the simple act of sitting and writing feel like the most natural thing in the world, the only thing, the perfect thing. There is nowhere else he needs to be, nothing else he needs to do, no other moment but this one, stretching out into infinity, each second containing eternity, each breath containing all breaths, each letter containing all meaning. The page before him is nearly complete, only a few more lines remaining in the day's assigned portion of text, but he does not hurry toward completion, does not rush to finish, but maintains the same steady pace, giving each word the same attention, whether it is the first word of the morning or the last word of the afternoon, whether it is a simple article or a profound theological term, each receiving equal care, equal devotion, equal love. This is the heart of the practice, this equality of attention, this refusal to distinguish between important and unimportant, between exciting and mundane, but to treat all work as sacred work, all words as holy words, all moments as opportunities for prayer and presence and perfect action. And in this state, Brother Thomas finds a peace that passes understanding, a silence that speaks more eloquently than any words, a stillness that contains all movement, all life, all meaning, gathered here in this ancient room, in this timeless practice, in this holy work of preservation and transmission, where each letter is indeed a prayer, and each word is indeed a devotion. And the whole act of writing becomes an offering to something vast and eternal and infinitely compassionate that watches over all the works of human hands with patient love. And now, as the afternoon light begins to soften and fade beyond the narrow windows of the scriptorium, Brother Thomas becomes aware of a subtle shift in the quality of the silence around him, a deepening, a gathering in of the day's energies as the monastery prepares for the coming of evening. The shadows have grown longer across the worn stone floor, stretching from the bases of the wooden desks toward the center of the room, like quiet reminders that all things move in their appointed cycles, that even this timeless work of copying and illumination exists within the rhythm of daylight and darkness, waking and rest. He pauses in his work, his brush hovering just above the page, and allows himself a moment to simply observe the changing light. The way it has shifted from the clear brightness of morning to something more amber, more golden, softer around the edges. The other scribes around him are also slowing, their movements becoming more deliberate, more measured, as though they too can feel the day preparing to release them from their labors. Brother Thomas looks down at the page before him, at the illuminated letter he has been working on throughout the afternoon, the rich blue of the lapis lazuli background, the delicate gold leaf catching what remains of the natural light, the intricate vine work spiraling into the margin, and he feels a deep satisfaction settle in his chest. Not the satisfaction of pride, but something quieter, something more like gratitude. Gratitude that he has been given another day to practice this craft, to serve in this way, to participate in the ancient and sacred work of preserving the words that carry wisdom and light across the centuries. He can hear the distant sound of bells beginning to ring, calling the brothers to vespers, the evening prayer that marks the boundary between the work of the day and the rest of the night. But there is time yet, a little time before they must set down their tools and make their way to the chapel. Time to complete this one small portion, to bring the day's work to a proper close, to prepare the scriptorium for the darkness and stillness of night. Brother Thomas dips his brush once more into the pigment, a warm red made from crushed cinnabar, and adds the final delicate touches to the border he has been creating. Tiny flowers that seem to bloom along the edge of the text, each one requiring patience and a steady hand, each one an offering of beauty. And as he works, he feels himself settling even more deeply into the quietness, into the peace that has been building throughout the day, layer upon layer of silence and concentration, until it has become something almost tangible, something he can rest in, something that holds him gently as the light continues to fade and the evening draws closer, breath by breath, moment by moment, in the timeless sanctuary of the scriptorium. The bells for vespers fade into silence, and Brother Thomas rises slowly from his bench, feeling the stiffness in his shoulders and back from the hours of bending over his work, a gentle reminder that even in this life dedicated to the spirit, he inhabits a body that grows tired, that needs rest, that moves through the same physical world as all living things. Around him, the other scribes are also standing, stretching carefully, beginning the evening rituals that will bring the scriptorium to rest for the night. But they do not hurry. Even now, even as the day's work is ending, they move with the same deliberate care they bring to their copying and illumination, understanding that the closing of the day is as much a part of their practice as the work itself. Brother Thomas watches as Brother Benedict, the eldest of the scribes, moves along the row of desks, lighting candles, one by one, each flame coming to life with a soft whisper of ignition, each one adding its small glow to the gathering dimness. The candlelight is different from sunlight. warmer, more intimate, creating pools of amber radiance that push back against the shadows without banishing them entirely, allowing the darkness and the light to coexist in gentle balance. Brother Thomas turns his attention to his own workspace, to the tools that have served him throughout the day, and he begins the closing ritual that has become as familiar to him as prayer, as natural as breathing. First, he carefully lifts the manuscript page he has been working on and sets it aside to dry, positioning it where it will be safe through the night, where no moisture or dust or careless hand might damage the work of the day. He looks at it for a long moment, at the text he has copied in his careful hand, at the illuminated letter with its blue and gold and crimson, at the delicate border decorations, and he offers a silent prayer of thanks that his hand remained steady, that his concentration held, that the work was accomplished. Then he turns to his quills, the tools that are like extensions of his own fingers that have moved across the vellum in service to the words. He takes them one by one and wipes them clean with a soft cloth, removing the remnants of ink with slow, attentive movements, each stroke of the cloth a kind of meditation, a way of honoring the tools that make the work possible. Some of the quills will need to be recut tomorrow, their points worn down by the day's use, but that is work for the morning, for the fresh beginning that dawn will bring. For now, it is enough to clean them, to care for them, to prepare them for rest, just as he is preparing himself for rest. The movements are repetitive, soothing, requiring no thought, allowing his mind to settle even more deeply into quietness. Around him, he can hear the soft sounds of his brothers engaged in the same rituals, the gentle scraping of tools being cleaned, the quiet footsteps moving between desks, the occasional whisper of fabric against fabric as robes shift with movement. The scriptorium is transforming from a place of work into a place of rest, and Brother Thomas is grateful to be part of this transformation, to participate in this daily rhythm that connects him to all the scribes who have come before and all who will come after. With his quills cleaned and laid carefully in their place, Brother Thomas turns his attention to the pigments and inks that have colored his world throughout the day. The small ceramic pots and shells that hold the precious colors are arranged on his desk, some nearly empty after a day's use, others still full, waiting for tomorrow's need. He begins with the most valuable, the lapis lazuli, that deep heavenly blue that comes from stones carried across mountains and deserts from distant lands, ground into powder finer than flour, mixed with binding medium to create a color that seems to hold the sky itself. There is only a small amount left in the shell, just a residue really, but even this must be treated with care, with respect for the rarity and cost of the material. He covers it with a small piece of cloth, protecting it from dust, and places it carefully in the wooden box where the most precious pigments are kept. Then the gold leaf, those impossibly thin sheets of hammered gold that catch light like tiny suns, each one delicate enough to be lifted by breath, valuable enough to be guarded carefully. He counts the remaining sheets, 5 left from the packet he opened this morning, and places them between protective layers of parchment before returning them to their box. The vermilion, the lead white, the verdigris green, the ochre yellows, each pigment is sealed, covered, returned to its proper place with movements that have become automatic through years of repetition. This too is a form of meditation, this careful ordering, this putting away, this preparation for the night. As he works, Brother Thomas becomes aware of a deepening sense of completion, of rightness, as though the day is being properly honored through these closing rituals, as though the work is not truly finished until the tools and materials have been cared for and put to rest. The ink pots are sealed with small wooden stoppers to prevent evaporation. The grinding stones are cleaned of any residue. The brushes are washed in clean water and shaped carefully so they will dry properly and be ready for use in the morning. Each small task is performed with the same attention he brings to the copying of sacred text, with the understanding that there is no separation between the work itself and the care of the tools that make the work possible, that all of it is part of the same continuous practice of devotion and service. Around him, the scriptorium has grown quieter still, the sounds of cleaning and organizing beginning to fade as the scribes complete their tasks. The candlelight seems brighter now that the last of the daylight has faded completely from the windows, and the room has taken on the quality of a sanctuary at night, a sacred space held within walls of stone, protected from the darkness outside, warm and safe and infinitely peaceful. Brother Thomas can feel his body relaxing, his shoulders dropping, his breathing slowing, as the rituals of closing bring him closer to the rest that awaits. There is just a little more to do, just a few more tasks, and then he will be free to make his way to the chapel for Vespers, to join his voice with the voices of his brothers in the evening psalms, to offer the day back to the divine through prayer and song. But for now, in this moment, there is just this: the quiet scriptorium, the warm candlelight, the tools carefully cleaned and put away, and the deep satisfaction of work well done, of a day properly lived, of participation in something larger than himself that continues on, steady and sure, through all the days and nights of the turning world. The workspace now ordered and clean, Brother Thomas takes a moment to simply stand still, his hands resting lightly on the edge of his desk, and he allows himself to look around the scriptorium one more time before leaving for evening prayer. The room has been transformed by candlelight into something almost otherworldly, a space that seems to exist outside of ordinary time, where the hours of the day have dissolved into a kind of eternal present, where past and future meet in the continuous now of the present moment. He can see his fellow scribes at their own desks, some still completing their final tasks, others standing as he is, in quiet contemplation, all of them moving slowly, peacefully, through the ending of the day. Brother Benedict has finished lighting all the candles, and he now makes his way between the desks, checking that all the manuscripts have been properly secured, that no pages are left vulnerable to drafts or accident, that everything is prepared for the night. It is a task he performs every evening, this final, watchful survey, and there is something deeply comforting in the reliability of it, in knowing that someone is keeping watch, that the work is being protected, that nothing will be lost to carelessness or chance. Brother Thomas feels a wave of affection for the old scribe, for his steady faithfulness, for the way he cares for the scriptorium and all who work there with a quiet diligence that never wavers. And he realizes that this too is part of what sustains him in this life. Not just the work itself, but the community of those who share the work, who understand without words the dedication it requires, the patience, the surrender of ego, the commitment to serving something greater than personal ambition or desire. They are brothers not just in name, but in the deepest sense, bound together by their common purpose, by their shared devotion to the preservation of knowledge and beauty, by the countless hours they have spent side by side in the pregnant silence of the scriptorium, each one working alone, yet somehow together, individual yet united. Brother Thomas takes a slow breath, drawing in the mingled scents of the room, the waxy sweetness of candles, the faint acrid tang of ink, the musty richness of old parchment, the clean mineral smell of stone walls, and he commits this moment to memory, this feeling of peace and completion, of being exactly where he belongs, doing exactly what he was meant to do. He knows that tomorrow will bring new challenges, new pages to copy, new illuminations to create, that the work is never truly finished, that there will always be more books needed, more manuscripts to preserve, more wisdom to transmit to future generations. But for now, in this moment, the day's work is complete, and that is enough. More than enough. He bows his head slightly, closes his eyes, and offers a prayer of gratitude, not in words, but in the silent language of the heart, a simple acknowledgement of the gift of this day, of the privilege of this work, of the grace that allows him to participate in this ancient and holy tradition. Thank you, his heart whispers. Thank you for this day, for these tools, for this work, for these brothers, for this place of peace and purpose. Thank you for the manuscripts that wait in the darkness to be brought into being, for the words that need to be copied, for the beauty that asks to be created. Thank you for the silence and the candlelight, for the stone walls that shelter us, for the bells that call us to prayer, for the rhythm of the hours that gives shape to our days. Thank you for everything, for all of it, for the great and the small, the difficult and the easy, the seen and the unseen. Thank you. Brother Thomas opens his eyes and gently pushes away from his desk, his movements slow and slightly stiff from the long day of sitting, but his heart light, settled, at peace. Around him, the other scribes are also preparing to leave, gathering their robes around them, moving toward the door that will lead them through the stone corridors to the chapel for Vespers. But there is no rush, no urgency. They move like water flowing, like clouds drifting, like shadows lengthening, with the unhurried pace of those who understand that presence is more important than speed, that mindfulness is more valuable than efficiency. Brother Thomas joins the silent procession, falling into step with his brothers, and as they leave the scriptorium, he turns back for one last look. The manuscripts rest on their desks, safely positioned, the pages completed today already beginning their journey into the future, carrying the words forward through time. The candles continue to burn, left to provide light for a little while longer before they too will be extinguished. But for now, they keep their vigil, small flames of devotion in the darkness, witnesses to the work, guardians of the silence. The door closes softly behind him, and Brother Thomas walks slowly through the darkened corridors of the monastery, his feet knowing the way without thought, having walked these passages hundreds, thousands of times. The stone walls rise on either side, cool and solid, permanent in a way that human life is not. Yet they too were built by human hands, stone laid upon stone through years of labor, shaped by patience and skill into a place of refuge, of prayer, of work and rest. He can hear the soft footfalls of his brothers ahead and behind him, can hear the whisper of their breathing, the rustle of their robes, and he feels himself part of a river of devotion that flows through these corridors day and night, year after year, century after century, an unbroken stream of souls dedicated to the service of something vast and holy and mysterious. And as he walks, Brother Thomas feels the events of the day settling in him, finding their proper place, becoming part of the great accumulation of days that make a life, that shape a soul. The words he copied, the illuminations he created, the silence he inhabited, the community he served, all of it is woven together into a single tapestry, a pattern that he cannot see from where he stands, but that he trusts is there, is real, is meaningful, in ways he may never fully understand. His breathing slows even further, his footsteps becoming softer, his awareness expanding to include everything and nothing, the stone beneath his feet, the darkness around him, the brothers who walk with him, the manuscripts resting in the scriptorium, the candles slowly burning down, the night settling over the monastery like a blessing, and somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the darkness, the stars are coming out one by one, ancient and patient, watching over the earth with the same steady faithfulness that has guided his hand throughout the day. And Brother Thomas knows, with a certainty beyond words, that when dawn comes again, he will rise, and he will make his way back to the scriptorium, and he will take up his quills and his pigments, and he will begin again, and it will be the same work, and it will be new work, it will be repetition, and it will be fresh creation, and all of it will be prayer, all of it will be devotion, all of it will be enough. But for now, for this moment, there is just the slow walking through darkness, the quiet breathing, the peaceful heart, and the deep, deep rest that waits at the end of the day, soft as candlelight, gentle as silence, vast as the night sky, welcoming him home to sleep, to dreams, to the restoration that comes when the work is done and the tools are put away and the soul can finally, gratefully rest. Thank you for listening tonight. If this story helped you drift off, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more calming stories. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you next time.